Hey there, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. We are jumping back into Head to Heart Daily Devotions. We've been cruising through the entire book of Luke, and this week we are coming to a close. We have 4 videos left, and I'm excited for what we're doing here because it's going to be a little different. If you've been following with us at all, you know we've been reading small chunks at a time and then asking ourselves a reflection question and prayer point at the end. But for this portion, the last 4, we're going to do it a little different. The last 4 chapters of Luke here are super important. It's the climax of the story. This is what everything has been building up to. It's this moment where Jesus has entered Jerusalem and we're about to see what plays out. The mission that Jesus has come to earth for is unfolding in front of us right here. And what I want to do is I want to take these as a story. I just don't want us to take it piece by piece right now because I feel like in doing that, there's so much good to dig out. But especially if this is your first time reading this, I want to take this as a story. I want us to take a step back and see the big picture of this play out, of what's happening and who Jesus is through this story. So that's my hope in this, is that we're going to go through these 4 chapters, 1 chapter at a time, 1 per video. And my hope is that you begin to see the big picture of what's going on. For these videos, I'm going to be giving you 2 questions to start with that you can be thinking about as we read. So these videos aren't going to have a prayer point and reflection question at the end. Instead, it's going to give you 2 questions at the beginning that I just want you to think on and focus through. Those 2 questions are, what does this reading teach me about Jesus? Like, who is he? What's he like? Why is he doing the things he's doing? What is his heart like? That's your first question, is what does this teach me about Jesus? Because Jesus is our revelation of who God is. And so whatever it's teaching us about Jesus, that's what it's teaching us about God. And so we see God in Jesus and how he's working, what his heart is like. So ask yourself that as we go through. Maybe even write this question down. What does this teach me about Jesus? And take notes as we read through it. And the second question is, how am I supposed to respond to the truth I just read? How am I called to respond? So as we read these things, there will be certain things that it's a truth. It's Jesus teaching something to his followers. It's what he's telling them they need to be like, or they need to be ready for. And so for us reading this, we got to ask ourselves, what does that mean for me? What does it mean for me to live that out? So that's your preface to these videos. Make sure you're doing that. Write those 2 questions, maybe take notes as we go through, because we're going to be reading a whole chapter. It might be a lot more reading than we've normally done, but I think it's going to be good to just, again, step back and see the whole story play out, what's going on. So we're going to jump into chapter 21, and here we go. As Jesus looked up, he saw rich putting their gifts into the temple treasury. He also saw a poor widow put in 2 very small copper coins. Truly, I tell you, he said, this poor widow has put in more than all the others. All these people gave their gifts out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in all she had to live on. Cool little segment there. God looks at the heart, not the amount that's being given. He sees the heart, and she has given all. Some of his disciples were remarking about how the temple was adorned with beautiful stones and with gifts dedicated to God. But Jesus said, as for what you see here, the time will come when not one stone will be left on another. Every one of them will be thrown down. Jesus just predicted the destruction of the temple. Teacher, they asked, when will these things happen, and what will be the sign that they are about to take place? He replied, watch out that you are not deceived, for many will come in my name, claiming I am he, and the time is near. Do not follow them. When you hear of wars and uprisings, do not be frightened. These things must happen first, but the end will not come right away. Then he said to them, nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be great earthquakes, famines, pestilences in various places, and fearful events, and the great signs from heaven. But before all this, they will seize you and persecute you. They will hand you over to synagogues and put you in prison. And you will be brought before kings and governors, and all on account of my name. and so you will bear testimony to me. But make up your minds not to worry beforehand how you will defend yourselves. For I will give you words and wisdom that none of your adversaries will be able to resist or contradict. You will be betrayed even by parents, brothers, sisters, relatives, and friends, and they will hate you because of me. But not a hair of your head will perish. Stand firm and you will win life. So Jesus is obviously saying some scary things, and what it's pointing to is two things. One, he's predicting the future destruction of Jerusalem because they have rejected Jesus, they have rejected God. And every time in the Old Testament even, we saw that when the nation would walk away from God, he would bring judgment. When they separate themselves from God, he brings judgment to show, these are the consequences of your actions. And so the destruction of Jerusalem is coming. But Jesus is also pointing to a second thing, and that's his coming home, his coming back, meaning that he's leaving, right? So Jesus is telling them these things are about to happen, bad things are going to come. I'm going to be gone, but I will return again. He's talking about his second coming and the signs that will point to what happens before that. When you see Jerusalem being surrounded by armies, you will know that its desolation is near. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains, let those in the city get out, and let those in the country not enter the city. For this is the time of punishment and fulfillment of all that has been written. How dreadful will it be those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. There will be great distress in the land and wrath against the people. They will fall by the sword and will be taken as prisoners to all the nations. Jerusalem will be trampled on by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. And so Jesus is talking about the physical destruction of the temple, what's coming because of the people's rejection of God. We actually do see this play out in history. The Jewish people tried to rebel against Rome. They tried to take down Rome, and it had some battles against them that were successful at first, but then the Romans conquered them and they came after the Jews, and a lot of the Jews hid in the temple and they destroyed the temple, set it on fire, took it apart stone by stone, taking everything out of it, all the gold, all the marble. And so the destruction of the temple came, I think it was like 70 AD or something, but this happened. That Jesus has predicted the destruction of the temple, which would have been unthinkable for the Jews because it was this massive, amazing building. But now Jesus is also pointing to the future where his second coming, when Jesus comes back and judges the world. And so there's kind of a parallel between these two things. There will be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars. On the earth, nations will be in anguish and perplexity at the roaring and tossing of the sea. People will faint from terror, apprehension of what is coming on the world, for the heavenly bodies will be shaken. At that time they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with power and great glory. When these things begin to take place, stand up and lift your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. He told them this parable, look at the fig tree and all the trees. When they sprout leaves, you can see for yourselves and know that summer is near. Even so, when you see these things happening, you know that the kingdom of God is near. Truly I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. Verse 34 is important because this is the warning that he was giving to his followers, but also to us. So your second question that I asked you to pay attention to, this is something that we can take note of. Be careful, or your hearts will be weighed down with carousing, drunkenness, and anxieties of life, and that day will come upon you suddenly like a trap. For it will come on all those who have lived on the face of the whole earth. Be always on the watch, and pray that you may be able to escape all that is about to happen, and that you may be able to stand before the Son of Man. So really what Jesus has just said is be ready, Don't get carried away with the anxieties and cares of this life. Don't be acting irresponsibly in this life and getting drunk and really, even if it's not getting drunk, it's the just participating in the corruption of this world. Don't get weighed down with those things. Instead, have a clear mind, have your eyes set on Jesus and his return and just his eternal kingdom, really. It's get your eyes off of this world into that one, because it changes the way you live when you do that. Each day Jesus was teaching at the temple, and each evening he went out to spend the night on the hill he called the Mount of Olives. So Jesus rested every night on the Mount of Olives. That's important for later. And all the people came early in the morning to hear him at the temple. So that's chapter 21. There's a lot thrown at you, but it's important to begin to see what's happening, what's taking place in the grand narrative, the big story. We're getting to the climax of the story. It's going to be intense. Tune in for tomorrow's video on chapter 22. Chapter 22 is when things really begin to get intense. So I'll see you then. Have a good one. Later.